The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream. Change has come to America.
Believe it.
Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
Today, exactly 1 year after the murder of George Floyd, on the streets, urgency over police reform.
Has enough changed?
No, I don't think enough has changed.
Can you believe it's been a year?
It's been a whirlwind.
For Tara Brown and Sharita Tate, the loss of their cousin is still fresh.
Our hearts are still broken because we'll never have him again to be able to hug us or to talk to us. But we're optimistic that some things have changed as a result of his death.
Among those changes, a murder conviction for the former officer who knelt on Floyd's neck for 9.5 minutes. But
we haven't had meaningful police reform in 57 years in the federal government. And so this is our opportunity.
Still, since Floyd's murder, there have been changes on a smaller scale. At least 3,000 policing-related bills have been introduced in state legislatures. More than 30 states have enacted new police oversight and reform laws. For some, not enough.
What has changed in America?
Nothing. Nothing has changed.
We sat down with 3 women who now share an unwanted bond. George Floyd's younger sister, Bridget.
They have got our hopes up on several occasions about what they were going to do, and we have yet to see anything happen.
Elisa Charles Finley is the sister of Botham John, who died in 2018 when a white Dallas police officer mistakenly entered his apartment and shot him. She was convicted of murder.
Has Congress moved quickly enough on police reform?
No.
Is that a broken promise to you?
Of course it is.
Gwen Carr is the mother of Eric Garner, who died in 2014 in New York City following a police chokehold. That officer was not charged.
I would like the police officers to stop making more members of this club. This is a club that no one wants to be a part of. We live every day with this pain.
Oh, my God. So it's 1 year, and we were supposed to have police reform. Hello, everybody. Hello. We were supposed to have police reform by today, and, of course, stalled in the Senate. You know, the George Floyd Accountability and Policing Act, whatever they're calling it, passed the House twice. You know that. And it stalled in the Senate, which is going to be the epitaph of Mitch McConnell. You understand? It's like Jimmy wants on his grave, he loved butter. And I will do that for my ex-husband. I will make sure that's what his... But for Mitch McConnell, it has to say, stalled in the Senate, impediment to progress, and the years of his non-service to this nation. I mean, it's just so unbelievable. So here you have the 1 year anniversary. I hate calling it an anniversary. It's a commemoration of the murder of George Floyd. And thank God for a young girl named Darnella Frazier, who had the gumption, the temerity, the bravery to stand on the sidewalk with her cell phone camera and document the murder while Derek Chauvin looked audaciously and with total contempt straight to camera while he was killing a man for over 9 minutes, 9 minutes and 29 seconds, right? And now, thanks to the Associated Press, yes, journalists, thanks to the Associated Press, Ronald Green's murder, which happened 2 years ago, 1 year ago, I know it's hard to keep up with all the dead black men, unarmed, right? 1 year ago, George Floyd, 2 years ago, Ronald Green, but thanks to the journalists at the Associated Press, we now have body cam footage from those 6 police officers who murdered Ronald Green. And so today, the Louisiana State Police are saying that the troopers that at least 2 of them, we know one of them, Hollingsworth, he suddenly was told that he was going to be exposed, and somehow that same day that he heard he might be fired, he got himself into a 1-car collision and died. So he died. So that leaves 5 officers. 2 of them, according to the Louisiana State Police, are going to be fired by the Louisiana State Police Department. This is coming from two sources with knowledge inside the investigation into Ronald Green's death, which didn't begin for 464 days after Ronald Green was murdered by these Louisiana state troopers, right? But I have to tell you that CNN is reporting that they had heard also that the two firings were going to happen last week. And for some strange reason, they did not happen. And nobody in the Louisiana State Police Department will elaborate on why they weren't fired. So now, a week after we've been able to see the murder of Ronald Green on the body cam of the police officers who murdered him, that was made public by the Associated Press, we're finding out that the family had filed a wrongful death suit because when the autopsy was, when the hospital received the body, they were told in the police report that Ronald Green had gone through the windshield of his car, and this is how he died. And it made no sense to them because none of his wounds were consistent with going through the windshield of a car. In fact, he had taser prongs lodged in him. And so they wrote on the report, this does not add up. And his family was able to get that report, and they were able to file a wrongful death suit. That was on May 6th of 2020. And in the wrongful death suit, they allege that that Ronald Green was brutalized by Louisiana State Police and Union Parish deputy officers, which caused his death. Okay? And the body cam footage that we saw was some of the officers who responded's body cam footage, because the senior officer, Lieutenant Clary, he was the senior officer who came out to the scene. Remember, they had to call a supervisor. He didn't report that he had body camera footage, even though he was required to submit it to the district attorney, John Belton, according to a spokesperson for the Louisiana State Police Department. He just didn't turn it over. He neglected to, report that he had body cam footage. Now, he was not part of the initial, he was the supervisor that was called because we learned through the George Floyd trial that when you use maximum restraint techniques, which they used on Ronald Green, not only was he handcuffed behind his back and laid prone on the ground, but he was also shackled by his ankles. And then the police officers decided, won't it be fun to drag him by his ankles while he's shackled? That would be fun. And then we also heard, recorded footage of a police officer saying that he beat the crap out of Ronald Green so bad that he was spitting blood, and that all of a sudden he just went limp. And so they decided to file the official police report and say he died by going through his own windshield. So internal reviews are currently going on to determine why those videos were not identified during the original criminal investigation, Captain Nick Manal said. So what has changed in the year? Well, we got a little sliver, a glimpse into what justice is supposed to actually look like, sound like, smell like in a courtroom, right? We got a little tiny glimpse. But you have to remember that only 1%, 1.1% of police officers will ever go on trial for, let's say, an unarmed man turning up dead after their interaction with that unarmed man. 1.1% of police. So obviously we need the George Floyd Policing Act to be passed. We haven't passed police reform in this here country in 57 years. Now, the uber right wing, the crazies out there who just make crap up as they go along, they're going to tell you that somehow people who talk about police reform, who are, interested in seeing what's on those body cams, who actually worked really hard to get those body cams to be on police officers, are against police.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
Let's talk about solutions.
and where things actually stand with police reform. Meeting recently in a Senate room named after the late segregationist Dixiecrat Strom Thurmond, Senators Scott and Booker, as well as Democratic Congresswoman Karen Bass, were able to hammer out some areas of agreement. On the common ground side of the ledger, the draft bill would tentatively create federal standards for no-knock warrants, a ban on chokeholds, except in life-threatening situations, and limits on the equipment that the Department of Defense can send to state and local police departments, countering the increased militarization of the cops. But there are still major sticking points, specifically over qualified immunity, which stops police officers from being sued by victims and families for alleged civil rights violations. Now, Republicans oppose changes to this, arguing with some reason that it would make it harder to recruit and retain police officers. Influential South Carolina Democrat Jim Clyburn frustrated some progressives when he argued that this issue should not stop the passage of police reform.
If we don't get qualified immunity now, then we'll come back and try to get it later. But I don't want to see us throw out a good bill because we can't get a perfect bill.
Now, if there's room for compromise on qualified immunity, it may be in putting the financial risk on the police departments rather than on the officers themselves. There are other key accountability reforms that should be in the bill, like a mandatory national database of serious police misconduct to stop the police hop that enables bad cops to join other departments. There are also questions about what could be done to require police departments to release body cam footage faster. Look, there are roughly 18,000 police departments in the United States. We don't have a one-size-fits-all system here, but if the federal government subsidized purchasing and updating body cameras, reducing costs to local taxpayers, that could come with conditions about releasing body camera footage faster, says Dolores Jones Brown, a former prosecutor and professor at Howard University and John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Quote, blanket claims by law enforcement that transparency would compromise a particular investigation should not be accepted as routine, she says. Body cameras protect good cops and hold bad cops accountable, but lack of transparency can enable false reports. Police reform needs to rebuild the trust that's been broken between cops and the communities they're supposed to serve and protect. And that's why any bill should also fulfill President Biden's commitment to invest more money in police training rather than rhetoric about defunding the police.
And that's all you will hear from anybody who refuses to look at the fact that not all police are bad police. There are a ton of bad police. They do hop from police, from a jurisdiction to another jurisdiction. You know, they get fired from this one for excessive force. They go to that one and they get a job there and nobody tracks them. And the trust that gets broken between the police and the communities in which they serve is dangerous for the police, and it's dangerous for the people who live in the communities that they serve. And rational people, smart people, intelligent people, people who really want to solve problems of bad policing, people who want to solve the problems of crime, people who want to solve the problems of excessive force being used against police. Yes, the militarization of our society, the fact that America is awash in guns makes it less safe for police to police. But you never hear that from the people who swear they love the police. You never hear a thought about what the police are actually coming up against in the communities that they police, because you have yahoos out there with semi-automatics. You have yahoos out there with, high-capacity magazines. It's just so unbelievable. And criminologists, as well as police departments across this country, all agree that a huge problem in keeping communities safe and a huge problem that police face is the enormity of guns in this here society, in this culture. So, of course, Texas, always with an eye towards solving your problems, has decided that Greg Abbott is going to sign a bill that just passed the House and the Senate in Texas, 8262, behind closed doors, midnight Sunday, dead of the night on Sunday. And the Senate approves it yesterday, 17-13. You got 30 people. And the Texas legislature meets once every 2 years. You would think they would be interested in solving the problem of their antiquated, crummy, crud-like electrical grid problem that, caused people to freeze to death just this past winter. But oh no, they decided to take their valuable, limited time and focus on passing a gun bill that says, no license is necessary to carry a concealed weapon, and no license is needed to carry an exposed weapon. You can carry whatever the hell you want. You don't need to obtain a license to carry a handgun in Texas if you're not prohibited by the state from possessing a gun. That's going to really help the police. Yeah, that's going to make the police feel a whole lot better, isn't it? I mean, it's just they're so into whatever it is they want when they want it, without regard for who it hurts, without regard for what the fallout will be, without regard for what it means to, try and keep a neighborhood safe. It's just so unbelievable. And so here we are trying to solve a problem of police officers who would cover up crime, not being able to serve on police forces, so that police officers who risk their lives going into communities where everyone's got a gun, holy crap, can be safer. It's so unbelievable. All right, so here are some of the changes that have happened in policing. Now, just like we play in these reports, there are 18,000 different police departments in the United States. 18,000 of them. Policing is uber local. Okay, it's really local. It's like school boards and schools. It's local. So what you want to do with federal laws is create a floor under which no one can sink. And so some of the things that we want to do is ban chokeholds nationwide. Now, you want to mandate use of body cameras. This is, and you also need a law that says that the body cameras must be viewable within 24 hours of an incident, at least to the district attorney. And also, can I just say, district attorneys, local, who bring cases in their local community courtrooms depend almost entirely on the testimony of the police in order to make their case against a perpetrator or somebody accused, right? So if they have to build a relationship with the local police in order to prosecute their cases, don't you think that they ought to be removed from the chain when it comes to prosecuting police officers, if need be, if something really ugly shows up on the body cam, like in the case of Ronald Green? Yeah, that needs to be fixed too, right? You can't have the local prosecutor who is working with the police day in, day out to build criminal cases, then have the same, obligation to hold the police accountable, the exact group that he depends on to make his cases, as the responsible party to investigate criminal police officers. And there are criminal police officers. I think we all remember the movie Serpico. Why do I bring that up? Because it's from the 70s, and we've been dealing with this since then. So instead of actually peeling back some of the protections for police officers who commit crimes in the line of duty, instead of going after these no-knock warrants that led to the death of Breonna Taylor, where we now know nobody was ever charged with her murder, they, on the other side of the lunatic fringe, they want to ban the protesters.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
It has been a year since your brother's murder. Tell us what's on your heart and what's on your mind today.
I'm thinking about all the activists and the people who stepped out and put their lives on the line during this pandemic. My brother, he was an asset to our family, and we loved him so much. He went to Minnesota to become a truck driver just to be able to do something to be meaningful for his kids, his daughter, Gianna. And it's been 1 year, and she had to watch the same thing everybody across the world has to watch, him being murdered on a video. And people just speak out. Germany, Europe, Ghana, everybody watched this case tremendously all over the world. They watched it closely. And I think about my brother all the time, and my sister called me at 12 o'clock last night. She said, this is the day that our brother has left the earth. Just devastated.
Your family has been devastated. The personal price that you have paid is immeasurable. Do you think, when you look at the state of affairs, how, around the world, but also Americans, how they understand the problem that African Americans are facing, do you think things have changed in the last year, Philonise?
I think things have changed. I think that it's moving slowly, but it's making progress. I just want everything to be better in life, because I don't want to see people dying the same way my brother has passed. We were at his court, at his trial, and Dante Wright passed 10 miles away from where we was trying to get accountability. And I'm like, hey, we can't have this. People shouldn't die with no justification. He was just killed. Innocent young guy. I watched his mom, had to try to console her. She couldn't even speak for days. All she could do was cry.
I mean, this has got to stop. And the only way to stop it is to talk about solutions. And you can't in mixed company. You understand that, right? You can't. And you cannot have a conversation with people who are part of a cult, who believe crazy stuff, who aren't grounded in reality, who don't read newspapers, who don't understand anything that's broken, in the justice system. But they just want to, show cult-like, sycophantic support for a broken system because they love cops. But they don't. They don't love cops. They don't like peace. They don't like security. They don't like safety. They don't like communities. They don't like anything. They like what they like when they like it, and they want it when they want it. And anybody that tells them that they can't have a semi-automatic Uzi, or they shouldn't, there's something wrong with them, and they are trying to destroy American society as we know it. We're insurgents, you understand, even though you can show video of actual insurgents that actually attacked the police, that literally beat them, that tased them, that gassed them, that sprayed them with bear spray, that stomped on them, crushed them, broke their freaking fingers, literally did all this damage to actual police officers. They will literally tell you they can't see it. It didn't happen. That's not real. Somebody manufactured that video. January 6th didn't happen. And Officer Fanone is a liar. And then they'll downshift into anti-Semitic rants and raves if you happen to be a messenger who's Jewish. They'll downshift into racist rants if you happen to be a messenger who is black. They'll actually downshift into anti-immigrant rhetoric if you happen to be a person with a tilde in your last name, okay? I mean, it is so bizarre. And America cannot survive this way. You understand how much trouble we are in? I will say, looks to me like autocracy is having a moment around the world. You just saw an airplane registered to the Republic of Ireland, Ryanair. Now, for people who don't have a passport and have never traveled, Ryanair is a low-cost carrier that typically has service between European cities when you're in Europe. So if you wanted to go from Rome to London, Ryanair would probably be your, okay. So it's a low-cost carrier, sort of like Spirit in the United States, like that. Okay, so here you have an airplane that was going from Greece in Europe to Lithuania in Europe. Now, I know that I've already lost the conservatives. They have no idea, what the relationship, like Greece would be south of that, and, no. And they wouldn't know that in order to get from Greece to Lithuania, you have to fly over a country called Belarus, which is where half my family is from, and the other half is from Ukraine, right? Well, they wouldn't know that either. But anyway, here you have this aircraft that is simply flying over the Russian friend state, allied state of Belarus, where they've had a dictator for 22 years in power who just lost an election for the first time in 22 years. And the election was so rigged that he couldn't believe he lost. And anyway, he blames it on dissidents. He blames it on protesters. He blames it on insurgents. He blames it on, and so he decided that he was going to send a fighter airplane into the European airspace and intercept this Ryanair flight, make it land in his country, Belarus, which is totally Putin land, okay? This Lukashenko guy, he is a Putin puppet. And then take a journalist, a young journalist, a 23-year-old journalist off the airplane, put him in prison, torture him, and make him get on state-run television and say he organized riots. He did it. He organized riots and insurrections and under the threat of torture and or death, or both. Who knows? I can't even believe it. And last night I was watching Rachel Maddow, and I honestly would never have known about this, but she decided to cover what's going on in Samoa. Why? Because they're going through their period of an autocrat too. They've had a prime minister who's been in power for 27 years, just lost an election, and doesn't want to leave either. So the Supreme Court ruled that he has to leave. He lost the election. So what does he do? He locks the doors to Parliament so that they can't certify their election and have a new prime minister take power. Something really disgusting is going on in this world with autocrats and treacherous leaders, people who just hate democracy but like the saying that they're democratic.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
Let me remind you, Donald Trump lied about the results of the last election.
Frankly, we did win this election.
Oh, my God.
And then, you remember, don't you? He tried to overturn the results.
If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us.
Trump twisted the arms of state election officials. He held a rally to stop Congress from certifying the election, followed by the violent attack on the Capitol. 5 people died. Senators and representatives could have been slaughtered. Several Republican members of Congress encouraged the attempted coup by joining him in the big lie and refusing to certify the election, even after the mob desecrated the halls of our democracy. This was in January of this year. Yet we seem to be doing everything we possibly can to blot it out of our memory. Meanwhile, those responsible for instigating the attack have not been held accountable in any respect, including by the media. The media is supposed to serve as a crucial check on those in power, but in its breathless desire to cover the news, it's failing to remind us of our recent past. The consequences of this failure are dire. Trump's big lie that the 2020 election was stolen and that President Biden is not legitimate is not disappearing. A majority of Republican voters believe him. That big lie is being used by Republican state legislatures to justify an all-out assault on the right to vote. Hours after Florida enacted new voting restrictions, Texas's Republican-led legislature pushed ahead with its own bill that would make it one of the hardest states in which to cast a ballot.
Jesus.
The Republican-controlled Arizona Senate launched a private recount of the 2020 presidential election results in Maricopa County, farming out 2.1 million ballots to GOP partisans with no experience in ballot counting or election monitoring. At least one person involved in the recount actually participated in the Capitol attack.
Jesus.
The Republican Party even purged one of its own leaders, Wyoming Representative Liz Cheney, for telling the truth about the election. Meanwhile, Republican state legislatures are muscling their way into election administration as they attempt to dislodge or bully local election officials who have always run our voting systems. Trump's big lie will continue to flourish unless the lawmakers who went along with it and have failed to renounce it face real consequences. That means a thorough, independent 9/11 type inquiry into what happened, whether members of Congress were involved, how Donald Trump and others were involved. Republican leaders must not duck this. They must be held accountable to the truth. Otherwise, the trauma of 2020 will return, perhaps in even more terrifying form.
So what we have here now are the same lunatic fringe members of Congress who refused to certify an election, refused to do it after January 6th, after all this violence against police, by the way, against the police. All this violence, all of this beating, all of this tasing, all of this bear spraying, all of this crushing, all of this, taking a Blue Lives Matter, which was a complete racist reaction to Black Lives Matter, right? Flags, and beating police officers with the flag that they say honors them. And even after that, you had these 147 members of Congress go along with the big lie, go along with, I'm not going to certify, I'm going to sign on to a legal thing, I'm going to, challenge, I'm going to this, I'm going to that. Way after audits had been conducted, hand recounts had been conducted, every challenge was met, people came up with 100% of the same results 3 times, not enough for them. And now these lunatics are running for Secretary of State in the states they used to represent in the House so that they can run and rig the elections themselves. And that is why I'm telling you, autocracy is having a moment. It is having a global moment. Propaganda is king, and people are believing not just the big lie, but lots of lies. Lots of manipulation of reality, fantastical media that literally makes crap up and feeds it to the people as an opioid so that they will be completely unaware of the reality around them. They will live in these fake news bubbles. They will be angry all the time. They will be cult-like adherents to whatever authority is put in front of them, including the police, even though they're willing to kill the police in service of the big lie. It is so backcrap crazy. It is so out of control and so dangerous that when you look around and you see Hungary going to Viktor Orban and that kind of autocracy, you see Belarus, the people in the street of Belarus. I mean, they're like, this is crazy. They understand, and they live in a society where there is state-run media, and somehow they can figure their way out of a paper bag. Somehow they know that their guy is a dictator. Somehow they know that the police have been arresting hundreds of, thousands of them over the course of, 20 years, and it's got to stop. But I'm telling you, we still have a shred of democracy in this country, and it's easier to fix it than it is to lose it and try and get it back. Because look, this is what it looks like there.
This is why the Belarusian authorities see this dissident journalist as such a threat. The social media channel founded by Roman Protasevich, who's just 26, was instrumental in organising these mass protests against flawed presidential elections last year. And of course, in exposing the brutal tactics used by Belarusian police to crack down. Tactics his father, who spoke to CNN from exile in Poland, says he fears will now be used on his son.
We are very worried as we expect torture and physical abuse, although we hope that that won't happen. But knowing the KGB methods, we hope that he will be strong enough and have enough willpower to endure all that awaits him.
Oh my God.
But for the first time since his extraordinary arrest at the weekend, the dissident journalist and campaigner has appeared from Belarusian jail on Telegram. Critics say he seemed under pressure. I'm now in jail number-1 in the city of Minsk. I can declare that I have no health problems, including with the heart or any other organs, he says. Now I will continue to cooperate with the investigation, and I am confessing to organising mass riots in Minsk. That confession, say critics, is likely to have been made under duress.
You think? And who enforces the autocrat's law? Who enforces the brutality? Gonna be the police. Gonna be the police. Which is why you need to keep the police honest and answerable to the neighborhoods and communities they serve. They cannot be loyal to a man. I'm telling you, we're in this crazy place right now. I've never seen crazy like this. I've never seen it. I've seen, you know, I've been through big lies before, and like I said, don't forget, you know, there was a huge big lie in 2002 and 3 about the need to go to war over there, right? Big, huge lie, weapons of mass destruction. We got all these, places that we're going to investigate, and we're going to find these weapons, and the mobile laboratories, and the anthrax factories, and the nuclear facility. And, you know, there wasn't. It was a big, giant ruse. It was a lie, and it caused 1 million Iraqis to be dead today, and over 5,000 of our soldiers to be killed, maimed, mangled, mutilated. The number of maimed, mangled, and mutilated. It's over 1 million Americans that served in this ridiculous lie of an effort over there. Okay. But the people in this country, they just look at the people who serve and do the, you know, based on the lie, and they excuse it. Well, thank you for your service. You know what? F you for not understanding my service. I feel just like Officer Fanone. He was like, some people tried to help me, and I felt like saying thank you, but F you for being here. You cannot sit here and participate in madness, in mass madness, and chaos and corruption by anybody in a position of authority and not challenge it and expect to have a democracy tomorrow. It doesn't work like that. Democracy is not self-healing. You don't love your country right or wrong. You love it when it's right. You right it when it's wrong.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me. Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
Fulton County, Georgia, which will undergo another audit of 2020 absentee ballots following claims of fraud. The Friday ruling by a judge allows for the ballots to be unsealed and reviewed by a group of electors claiming Fulton County election workers counted fraudulent ballots. The review will be done under the guidance and supervision of a special master appointed by the court. It comes after the group filed a lawsuit in December. The state of Georgia conducted 3 audits soon after the election, all of which reaffirmed the original outcome of the race.
You see what I'm saying to you? This lie, this big lie, by a 74-year-old narcissistic man who thinks he is more important than democracy itself, who thinks he's more important than America itself, who thinks he's more worthy of consideration, his lies and his, a disingenuous pose is more worthy of your adoration than is secretaries of state in all 50 states who not only counted ballots in a timely and efficient fashion, but then certified those ballots, and when challenged, audited those ballots, and in Fulton County, Georgia, did that 3 times. One audit was by hand, and 100% of the time they came up with 100% of the same information over and over and over again. But this seeding of doubt and fear and resentment, something was stolen from you. Something was taken. It wasn't taken from you. It was taken from him. By the people of this country. 7 million more of the people in this country in key essential areas where it mattered rejected him, rejected his lies, rejected his collusion, rejected his cheating, rejected his tax evasion, rejected his sexual predilections. They rejected him. And if he can't have America, then nobody can. And that is what people are actually going along with. And it is so offensive to people who give a damn about this country continuing to be the city on the hill, to be the shining example of what democracy looks like, to be the example of what a peaceful transition of power looks like. And because America is failing on that front, you have autocrats all over the world who are doing it too. Refusing to leave, refusing to respect the will of their own people, giving, the words that we are a democratic society. Russia, oh, we have elections. Belarus, oh, we have elections. We're democratic. We're not communists anymore. But acting just exactly like autocrats do. And now we have one of our own, and he is still reaching into the bowels of the dustbin of history and churning up all of this doubt and agitation in this country and shredding it, just ripping us apart based on fake news and opinion outlets and Newsmax and OAN and this and that and just conspiracy theories about pedophiles and satanic cults and just massive amounts of hatred, massive amounts, so that when we identify a problem, and we're always going to have problems, life is not without them. No system is without problems. No system of governance is going to work 100% of the time. Sometimes it's out of balance. Sometimes the power isn't divided properly. Sometimes people are militarizing, and there's this escalation of violence on the streets due to the militarization of a society that has to be talked about, and decisions have to be made about who and what and where gets to have, bazookas. But God help you in this country with all this hatred and resentment that is, all that the GOP has left. It's really, I don't know what they ever expected the GOP was going to end up being like after they embraced all this hatred, all this racism, a war on drugs, for God's sake, real wars, one after the other, after the other, after the other. Dead people, dead Americans, drafts, 19-year-olds, 58,000 dead here, 1 million wounded there, 1 million dead over here. I mean, what did they really think that their party's philosophy of racism and otherizing people and declaring war on people based on lies, what did they think? What good did they think would come of it? That's why the entire time I've been telling you it won't work. And I'm right. And I didn't really want to be that right, but I was telling you that there is no way that you can mess with the tax code to the point where only the rich come out with zero obligation to the government, and everyone else has to pay and pay and pay and get less and less and less. That's why when I tell you that wages are stagnant for 20 years, 30 years, not keeping up with, the cost of living, not keeping up with anything, I say it can't work. People are going to start getting so resentful that they work 40 hours a week and still live in abject poverty. The amount of resentment, the amount of frustration, it's going to reach a boiling point. It's going to reach critical mass. And the Republican Party is always there with a big lie telling you who to blame. And you know who did it is them. It's them. And I've said to you a million times, remember, when they point their finger at me, 3 fingers are pointing at themselves. And that's for a reason. Because they're the ones that done it. And now they have to rig the vote. Because enough people in this country have been hurt by their policies. Enough people in this country are devastated by them. And so there aren't enough people to have them prevail in any election, not even in Georgia, not even in deep ruby red Georgia. They can't win anymore based on their policies, based on their ideas. And so here they are rigging elections. The last bastion of scoundrels. Become an autocrat. Become the thing you've been railing against, outwardly, but inwardly we're desiring to be. All to keep power, just to keep power. Like losing an election is the worst thing that could happen to a dude or to a girl. What, you can't figure out that if you lost an election, you could be a pundit on, Fox News, or you could be an analyst on, CNN? You can't figure out that if you lose an election, you could write a book? You can't figure out that if you lose an election, you could be a lawyer? One of the bigger law firms? You can't figure out that if you don't have a law degree and you lose an election, you could be a lobbyist. Go to the National Association of Manufacturers. Go to the Chamber of Commerce and be a lobbyist. Make 7 figures. It's so amazing because it's all about power. It's not about representation. It's not about doing the right thing when no one's looking. It's about winning power, keeping power, holding power, regardless of what the people are telling you they want for representation. Well, then steal it. And They're throwing so many guns out into our population that people are going to end up, I don't know, I hate to think about it, but the police are already saying, wait. I mean, this without a permit Texas handgun thing, guess who's against it? Guess who? Me? The police. Yes, the police.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
What do they want? We've had 3 counts already. 1, 2, 3. This will be the 4th.
4.
Of the first 3, 1 of them was done by hand, and the results were eerily similar. So I'm not sure what they're all after, unless it's some participation trophy, something of that nature.
Huh.
The elections in Fulton County, Georgia, they were open, they were fair, and they were transparent. And what I've said from day one, I said to the then President of the United States, if you have some evidence of some malfeasance in Fulton County, bring it to me, I'll look into it. I made the same request of the Secretary of State and his representatives. If you have something, bring it to me. Otherwise, put up or shut up. I think what's happening here is that we won and they lost. It's as simple as that. They can't get over it. The votes have been certified. The election has been certified, so it's over. My advice would be go to the film room, look at what you did right, look at what you did wrong, make any adjustments that you need to make, but get ready for 2022 and 2024.
I mean, how many times does a democracy need to count the election votes? How many How many times does the world's greatest, freest, fairest democracy have to count ballots in order for the right wing, the 25% of this country who still identify as being Republican, need to understand that they lost? How many counts? This is undemocratic. This is sowing distrust, not just distrust for an opposition party. This is distrust in democracy itself. This is sowing distrust in elections. This is sowing distrust in the Constitution. This is sowing distrust in every nook and cranny of our lives. And you've got propaganda outlets here in the United States that are just as bad as state-run media in Belarus, just as bad as state-run media in freaking Russia and Poland, playing with people's heads here, people who don't read newspapers, people who can't orient themselves without the help of the TV. But I saw it on the TV. And they are saying, nope, count them again. Nope, count them again. Nope, count them again. This is crazy. This is mass madness, you maniacs, you. Kathy in California.
Hi, Randy. How are you?
All right.
I'm calling in, long-time listener. I agree with you 100%, 50%. I'm worried about my party, and we're not the best on messaging, because what I believe is Republican Party is gone. We have the MAGA cult. Their strategy is basically that elections won't matter. It doesn't matter. And there's a multi-pronged approach that they are taking. And it's not just the voter suppression. And it's not just, it's like, what they did a dress rehearsal. They're doing one now. Okay, what stopped them from being effective? Well, they had Republicans who were secretaries of state. Well, they're going to now plant new ones that won't be friendly to them. And so it's going to get to the point where it doesn't matter who shows up to vote.
That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah, that's what I'm agreeing with you for. But it's like our party needs to get better at messaging instead of going.
It's not about messaging. I mean, we're pretty lame at messaging. I mean, because Democrats and progressives, especially, they're more interested in policy and results. Right?
Exactly.
So
yes.
we don't.
And I love them for that, and that's why I'm a Democrat.
Yeah, but what I'm saying to you is that if you plant secretaries of state, meaning you plant people who will cheat for you. Let's say Rudy Giuliani was the Secretary of State of Georgia. We would not have had, a free and fair election in Georgia if you got these sycophantic, lunatic, the Chris Kobachs of the world or the Rudy Giulianis of the world. Or can you imagine Paul Gosar, crazy Paul Gosar, whose entire family said he's a white supremacist, he shouldn't be anywhere near power, let alone a congressman, being the Secretary of State of a state like California? I mean, that's what I'm telling you. I'm telling you that they will do just about any autocratic thing that they can do in order to rig the next election.
So how do we get that out in a succinct
You don't allow them to become Secretary of State. You have to wake up and pay attention to the state offices. You have to wake up and pay attention to not just your governor, but who's the Secretary of State, who's the lieutenant governor. Do you know what I mean? Everybody's got to start understanding that elections are local, phenomenons, right? They're locally conducted, right? Same thing with policing. Policing is a local endeavor. The Denver police are not the same as the New York City police, okay?
Right.
Everyone has to start getting. This is what the Republicans are good at. They have taken over state legislatures in so many states that they feel emboldened to cheat. The problem was that even though Georgia had a Secretary of State who was a Republican, even though Georgia had a Republican governor who cheated himself. Remember, he had to purge. He was a Secretary of State when he ran for Governor Kemp, against Stacey Abrams. And he saw that Stacey Abrams had a really good chance of beating him in Georgia. So what did he do as Secretary of State? He purged tens of thousands of voters off the active voter roll lists, right? Stacey Abrams caught him doing it, and even though she did not prevail because he suppressed votes, active voters, and turned them into non-active voters, she started fair fight, investigated it, exposed it, and moved to make legislation that would prohibit it from happening again, right? And even though he had cheated in his election to elevate himself from Secretary of State to governor, as governor, he wasn't willing to relinquish his power to say that something bad happened in Georgia against Donald Trump, because it didn't. And he just wasn't willing to do it. He thought there's a right way to cheat. Donald Trump is cheating wrong. He's doing it after the fact, and you can't cheat after the fact. You have to cheat on the front end. You have to suppress on the front end. You have to purge voters on the front end. You have to create legislation that says felons can't vote and they will never have their votes restored on the front end. You can't rig an election on the back end, and that's why he wouldn't go along with it. So even though you've had secretaries of state elevate their own selves into the governor's mansions in ruby red southern states like Georgia, they were telling you the whole time, Donald Trump's trying to find 11,870 votes after the fact. It doesn't work like that, Donald. And they were saying to him, you're an idiot. You're an idiot. And the Republican Secretary of State who took Kemp's place as Secretary of State when Kemp became governor, also Brad Raffensperger, also said, no. You can't call us up after an election and say, find me 11,870 votes. I think the people will reward you mightily. It doesn't work like that, you dope. You rig it on the front end, not the back end.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
We need only 11,000 votes. We have far more than that as it stands now. We'll have more and more. And do you have provisional ballots at all, Brad? Provisional ballots?
Provisional ballots are allowed, by state law.
Sure. But do you have them? I mean, are they counted or did you just hold them back because they, in other words, how many provisional ballots do you have in the state?
We'll get you that number.
Because most of them are made out to the name Trump, because these are people that were scammed when they came in, and we have thousands of people that have testified or that want to testify. When they came in, they were proudly going to vote on November 3rd, and they were told, I'm sorry, you've already been voted for, you've already voted. The women, men started screaming, no, I proudly voted till November 3rd. They said, I'm sorry, but you already been voted for, and you have a ballot. And these people are beside themselves. So they went out and they filled in a provisional ballot, putting the name Trump on it. And what about that batch of military ballots that came in? And even though I won the military by a lot.
Okay, and you know how that turned out. He was rambling and making crap up and asking Brad, to cheat. To lie, to cheat, tell him how many provisional ballots he had, and that they just needed 11,800 votes. That's all he needed, and if he did it, everybody would be really proud of him, They were telling him, you yuts, you don't fix an election on the back end, you douche, you do it on the front end. Don't you know anything about cheating? You're supposed to be the world's greatest heavyweight champion cheater. You're the world's heavyweight champion liar. Why don't you know how to cheat? So what do? You pass voting rights legislation. That's what you do. You make it so that these voting laws, these suppression laws, hundreds of them, in 25 states, 43 states, have just run ramshod through these state legislators' hands, and you make a floor under which no one can sink by having voting rights legislation. voting rights. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act, you know what that would do? Do you know? So that if you change the voting rules, you would have to get pre-clearance from the federal government if you have a pattern and practice of discriminating against this kind of voter or that kind of voter. And what we're talking about here, obviously, is African-American voters. You pass the H.R. 1, it's passed the House, I can't tell you how many times. I mean, it's passed the House so many times, it's got like rug burn already, okay? Woo, just keeps passing. Boom, passing. Everything stalls in the Senate. Why? Because Mitch McConnell knows he can't win in free and fair elections anymore. He will never be the majority leader ever again if we have continually free and fair elections. Okay? Kevin McCarthy, he knows he will be the minority leader in the House forever unless they cheated elections. There just aren't enough people full of enough suspicion for their own government, for hatred and wanting resentment and blame and for other people. No, they understand that the rules have been rigged against them, and they would like to change the rules. Change the rules so that it's not how much money do you have, you could buy yourself a legislator. How much money do you have, you could buy yourself a judge. How much money do you have, you could buy yourself a speaker. I mean, this is ridiculous. This whole system of taxation and zero taxes for Amazon, but you pay 30% because you're self-employed. Come on. They can't win with their policies. They can't, and they never could. I mean, they had a little ride there for a little bit, and then they invented a Tea Party thing, and that was all about deficit spending. Oh, yeah, they really cared about it. And then as soon as they got power, what do? They spent us into oblivion by giving tax breaks, $2 trillion worth, to the top again. Lloyd in Michigan.
Randy, it's funny how slow they've been trying to get the George Floyd Policing Act passed, but then these laws to outlaw the teaching of critical race theory, well, they're passing like, they can't flip those laws fast enough.
What laws?
The laws to stop the teachers from being able to teach critical race thinking around the country.
So here's a perfect example of why Democrats suck at messaging. Okay? We're talking about teaching American history to American students in American classrooms and leave it to academia, Harvard no less, to call it critical race theory. Please don't call it that around me. That's just, it's just bizarre. We're talking about teaching American history, real American history and civics to 8th graders so that I could find a number that's better than 24% of our 8th graders knowing how a bill becomes a law. That's it. But they don't want to teach, American history either. 20 attorneys general, 20, in 20 different states, have told the Department of Education at the federal level that they oppose teaching American history. Seriously. They don't want to talk about current events in social studies class. And they don't want to talk about the real way America became America in American history class. They're against it, and they will go down fighting to not teach U.S. history to U.S. students. I swear to God, and teachers are beside themselves. They are like, oh my God, what do you mean we can't talk about current events? No, we don't want current events taught in school. I remember when I was in school, I'm gonna say, I still lived in Brooklyn, so I couldn't have been more than 11. And I used to have to cut out from the newspaper a newspaper article at least once a week and write a little paragraph about what the newspaper article was about. That was called current events. Well, teachers in social studies class are being forbidden. I don't know if you know this. They are being banned from having current events discussions in their social studies classrooms. Because the AGs, the attorneys general of these Republican states, think it's too divisive to have the children read a newspaper and learn what's really happening. Texas just passed it. Tennessee's Republican governor just signed a measure banning the teaching of American history and social studies, current events, in social studies classrooms and in American history classrooms. I'm telling you, autocracy is having a moment.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
Under the radar, in the dead of night, the Texas Senate passed a bill that will effectively ban public school teachers from talking about racism, white supremacy, sexism, or controversial current news events. The legislation has already passed the House and is being fast-tracked to Governor Greg Abbott's desk for signage. Democratic State Representative James Tellerico says it's going to have a chilling effect on social studies and civics teachers across the state.
I mean, you can't discuss current events in the classroom. You can't talk about issues of race when you're teaching American history. How in the world do you even teach American history and not talk about redlining or Jim Crow or slavery or Indian genocide or the Indian removal project? I mean, this is American history. How in the freak do you... I swear to God, this isn't just a big lie anymore. What you're talking about is a curriculum of lies, an amazing perversion of American history with an eye towards disorienting a whole new generation. It is so beyond. It is the exact opposite of what really happened, what they want taught in school. So why don't I just take the textbook and hold it upside down? Why don't I just do that? Save myself a whole bunch of money for printing new textbooks that are going to mangle, mutilate, and, teach exactly backwards what happened. Just hold the book upside down. Why even teach kids to read anymore? I mean, really. If the GOP has its way, and their way is to deny the truth about everything, let alone American history, you're going to have textbooks full of lies that racist lies that they now can believe in. Is basically what's going to happen here. Now, you know what was really interesting? On June 1st, you're going to have the 100-year commemoration of the demolition, the demolishing, really, of the terrorism that happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma to Black Wall Street, right? They don't even teach Black Wall Street. They don't even teach what happened in Greenwood, Oklahoma, in schools in Greenwood, Oklahoma. No, I'm serious. They don't even teach in Tulsa, Oklahoma, what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, that is a key event about racism in America and how African Americans were able to compete and sometimes outcompete their white neighbors in the same exact area of the country, in the same exact environment, with like recent freedom, like maybe one generation of freedom, become doctors, become lawyers, become architects, become teachers, become doctors, whatever. Make a living, join the middle class, if not the upper middle class, succeed, only to have the neighbors burn it all down, take the people who lived there and put them in internment camps. Now, that really happened, okay? It really did happen. It happened 100 years ago on June 1st. And they don't teach that in any school, including in Tulsa? Why? Just why? Somebody's going to have to answer that question. Why don't they teach that. I mean, it's like American history, but it's local history if you're in Tulsa, right? And they don't teach that to kids in Tulsa. And Tulsa became, and still is, one of the most segregated cities in the United States. Black people in northern Tulsa and white people in southern Tulsa. You think that just happened? Don't you think that somebody should teach how that happened so it can be fixed? I'm telling you, this is so ugly and so nefarious. It is so way beyond the big... The idea is to keep people really disoriented. It's all I want to... Just not stupid, ignorant, you could argue, but disoriented. Not understanding how things ended up this way means things continue this way. And when I say continue this way, I mean with the GOP having a majority, at least in Oklahoma, in their legislature. In Texas, at least in their legislature. See what I mean? This is the last bastion of scoundrels to disorient children, to withhold information that is valuable to a community from the community so that they can't better themselves, and then point at someone else and say that's who did it to you, when it was all by design. Patrick in Ohio.
Hey, Randy, how are you?
All right.
You might remember me as the white Bronco remember the old white Bronco story about the Air Force One? I was saying way back years ago, he's going to turn Air Force One into the white Bronco. I was just glad that didn't happen. But my question on topic was about election monitoring, and I was talking to the screener about it, and I guess my point more is about the media not calling attention to the fact that we've already been over all this. It's been through the courts.
Really, I honestly, I don't you know, why are we? What kind of a democracy counts the votes 3 times and then 4 times and then pays a private company with no election experience at all and gives them the voting machines, gives them the voting machines so that they can embed, so that they can.
And the media is reporting it like that's normal procedure almost.
So who's going to turn Air Force One into a white Bronco? Bush?
No, remember back when Trump was around, I was saying he's going to end up taking the Air Force One and fleeing to Russia, and it'll be like a white Bronco situation.
Oh. Well, that's
long ago.
You know what? He won't be able to do it with Air Force One, but there could be a white Bronco flight still. You know.
Right, with his dilapidated plane or whatever.
Well, I mean, I don't know if he still has a private jet that would, be able to do an overseas trip, but, so he may have to, after all, fly, like commercial.
Right. It's the same one he had the little model of, right? In the interview.
I don't know. I don't know what
There's an OAN, I think there was an OAN interview, and he's got this model of his Trump plane right next to him in the shot.
Oh, that he was going to repaint Air Force One and make it into, his colors.
I think. That one? Yeah, this was more recent because he's talking about
Why
reviving.
are you watching that crap?
No. It was a clip they showed on Jory. Yeah, I watch MSNBC, so it was Jory. I think put it on.
Oh, okay. No, I didn't. I didn't see his little model air. I didn't watch his little clip of the model airplane. But look, the premise that he could have to flee by air.
That would be sweet in a way, as long as it didn't take off.
It ain't over. I mean, the man is under criminal investigation for the first time. You know, that Letitia James over in New York, she was doing a civil investigation. And I kept having to show that to the audience that, the Attorney General was doing a civil. The U.S. Attorney was doing a criminal. And now her civil has been referred as a criminal. So now there's a big criminal investigation into him, too. So... Who knows? I mean, he still may have to flee.
Yeah, that'd be nice. But as long as I just wanted to see justice done somewhere. But it drove me nuts that Mueller never looked into the finances.
Yeah, me too. Me too, man. I got to tell you. I mean, that was what we were all thinking. An investigation would include if you were trying.
I was actually.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, we all thought that's what it would be included in an investigation into his dirty politics. But how do you investigate dirty politics without following any money?
Exactly.
It was just crazy. What a notion.
At the time, I was almost mad at Malcolm because Malcolm kept saying, "Justice is coming. He's going to get this guy," and I'm like, "When, Malcolm? When?"
Everybody was waiting. I know. Everybody was waiting for Mueller. Everybody was. It was like waiting for Godot. I mean, it was that freaking boring. I mean, it was like it moved slower than the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. That's how slow the Mueller investigation. And then only to find out, he was investigating, Russian interference in our election without looking at money. Oh, how do you investigate dirty politics without looking at money? Mueller. It was very disappointing. Very, very But we do have, a criminal investigation. We got many criminal investigations into this man. So he still may have to flee. You see what I mean? But honest to God, man, they are literally putting us at such a disadvantage in this country. The GOP is.
Mary had a little man.
The false. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me.
Help is on the way.
Knock, knock. Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
Mr. Trump is a cheat. As previously stated, I am giving to the committee today 3 years of Mr. Trump's personal financial statements from 2011, 2012, and 2013, which he gave to Deutsche Bank to inquire about a loan to buy the Buffalo Bills and to Forbes. These are exhibits 1A, 1B, and 1C to my testimony. It was my experience that Mr. Trump inflated his total assets when it served his purposes, such as trying to be listed amongst the wealthiest people in Forbes, and deflated his assets to reduce his real estate taxes. I'm sharing with you 2 newspaper articles, side by side, that are examples of Mr. Trump inflating and deflating his assets, as I said, to suit his financial interests. These are Exhibit 2 to my testimony.
That right there is fraud that Michael Cohen testified to back in the day. Remember the day? Yeah, back in the day. So here's where we are today. As of last night, we got a Washington Post story by Greg Farenthold and crew that says that Cy Vance in Manhattan, the Manhattan District Attorney, has actually proceeded to convening a grand jury to hear the charges of fraud, tax fraud, financial fraud, insurance fraud, and God knows what else, with an eye towards asking that grand jury to indict someone. Could be Donald Trump, could be Weisselberg, could be Trump and Weisselberg, could be the kids and Trump and Weisselberg, could be any combination of those. Or not ask them for an indictment and just use the grand jury for its awesome subpoena power. However, I really doubt that Cyrus Vance Jr., the district attorney in Manhattan, convened a grand jury just to have subpoena power, considering that he's already gotten Donald Trump's taxes. Yes, he has them, and we know he has them because it was reported in a newspaper, but, people don't read the newspaper. Anyway, Letitia James, who is the Attorney General of New York State, as opposed to the district attorney in Manhattan, she was also investigating Donald Trump's fraud, tax fraud, insurance fraud, etc. She also investigated the Trump charity and prevailed. And the Trump Foundation is now no longer, it is prohibited from even being in existence, right? And the children can no longer hold any position of honor in a charity because they defrauded their own foundation. And so that was a civil, the things that Letitia James was investigating, I always try to make people understand, was a civil investigation into solutions that would not take away your liberty, meaning you go to jail. That would be criminal. Civil usually involves you have to liquidate your company, you have to liquidate your foundation, you have to liquidate your charity, you have to pay a fine, money, penalties, rather than the penalty, the ultimate penalty of giving up your freedom and having to go to jail. However, Letitia James last week decided that she had the missing element that would take a civil moneyed penalty investigation over to the criminal side. And what is that missing ingredient? No, it's not Lipton onion soup, which is a great secret ingredient in lots and lots of things. No, the secret ingredient to making something civil into something criminal is intent. Did you intentionally want to break the law? Civil, you don't have to prove that anybody had the intent to violate the law, just that they did. Criminal, typically, there are exceptions, just like there are 110 exceptions to the rules of evidence. Swear to God. And that's just California. Intent. Criminal intent. Did you criminally, intentionally break the law? Letitia James felt that she had that missing ingredient. She felt that she had that there. And so she decided last week to now say that her civil investigation is now a criminal investigation, and that she was going to join forces with the Manhattan District Attorney. So the New York Attorney General and the Manhattan District Attorney now have a combi package of criminal activity that they feel they can back up with evidence to a grand jury, with evidence to a jury that would show criminal intent to violate the law. That the fraud was criminal, that the insurance fraud was criminal, that the tax fraud was criminal. And I'm sure there will be mountains and mountains and mountains of evidence against Donald Trump, just like there was in the Mueller investigation, except this time he will not have Bill Barr running roughshod over the law. Now, there's another little detail before we actually get into the criminal investigation and the grand jury, which has already convened in Manhattan to hear criminal charges against the Trump Organization, maybe Donald Trump himself, maybe Weisselberg. Maybe Weisselberg is the cooperating witness who can supply information that would show and prove the intentionality of the criminal behavior. Maybe he's the Lipton onion soup in all this. You know, maybe he doesn't want to spend his golden years in prison. Maybe he just said, that's not an appealing idea for me. But there's another issue that's out there. This is, the Bill Barr issue. What is the Bill Barr issue, Randy? Well, the Bill Barr issue is really pretty straightforward. Bill Barr decided that he was going to spin or PR or stage manage the Mueller investigation's findings of crimes against Donald Trump. Mueller didn't charge crimes because Mueller said that the Office of Legal Counsel had written some memo, we're all familiar, that said that a sitting president cannot be indicted. Now, that was challenged in court, like does that really apply to like murder and things like that? And an appeals court actually ruled, no, the president doesn't have, a vast immunity. You just can't indict him while he is president, okay? Bill Barr decided he was going to stage manage PR, spin. What Mueller found were criminal activities that Donald Trump engaged in with regard to at least 5 counts of obstruction of justice. Now, there are 3 elements to proving obstruction of justice, and Mueller went to great pains to show that in the 10 instances of obstruction that he found, at least 5 of them had all 3 elements of an obstruction charge, and he laid it out in volume 2 of the 448-page Mueller report. Well, it turns out that it is now time for the documents about why Bill Barr said Donald Trump couldn't be charged with obstruction even if he wasn't president, was full of lies. Not just lies to the American people, which we were all pretty clear about, we were all pretty sure about. No, but he lied to the court. And I think Bill Barr may now be a defendant as well.
All things Randy at RandyRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
What do you believe is that issue for Vance and his team to decide whether a charge is brought or not?
Well, we know from other public filings and from subpoenas we've reviewed that the DA is interested at least in the same transactions that the New York Attorney General has been talking about, which is transactions where Trump valued his assets quite high in order to impress lenders and have people think he's a good credit risk, and then devalue those assets, in some cases perhaps too much, in order to save on his taxes, to get tax breaks from conservation easements. And then in one case, he got $100 million+ worth of debt forgiven, and there's questions about whether he actually paid the proper income tax on that forgiven debt. But you have to remember, there's a whole universe out there of evidence we haven't seen yet, which is from Trump's tax returns. No one before Cy Vance had ever gotten a hold of that much information about Trump's finances. And from the little bit that I've seen of tax returns prepared by Donald Trump's folks, there were a lot of problems in the little bit that I've seen. So there could be a lot more problems in those millions of pages. The key for the DA, if they're going to go after... Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The key, if they're going to go after Donald Trump personally, is to prove intent. And this is a complicated case. Trump, I'm sure, is going to say, I relied on my lawyers, I relied on my accountants. Right. They have to find statements, witnesses, documents that show Trump knew what he was doing and did it anyway.
Right. And that is the difference between a civil violation and a criminal charge, right? Did Donald Trump rely on this person or that person? Because that's what he's going to do. He's going to say, I relied on Weiselberg. I relied on my account. I relied on Mazars. They're the cheats. Or are there contemporaneous notes, or is Weiselberg really willing to testify that Donald Trump understood that when $100 million of debt was forgiven by Trump's lender, that had to be declared as income, that had to face taxable income standards, right? Did Trump tell him, no, I don't want to claim it. You find a way that I don't have to pay taxes on this $100 million, okay? And that is an issue on a Trump Tower in Chicago. This is just a handful of properties that they're looking at, okay? There's another property outside of New York in Westchester County, okay? And then Donald Trump got a $21 million tax break on that particular property, okay? So here we're talking about at least $121 million taxable dollars that we may have been defrauded out of as a country because Donald Trump is a criminal. You see what I mean? So what they were looking at was whether or not that happened. And now the question has become, and the evidence probably is showing, which is why a grand jury has been convened. Grand juries indict people for criminal behavior. They don't indict people for civil violations, right? So the reason why the grand jury has been convened is obviously the missing secret ingredient. The intent is now something that can be shown and proven to a jury. Now, if that's true, if that's right, if the that's Greg Farenthold right there. That is the lead reporter for the Washington Post, the piece that came out last night. It's only 5 pages. You should really read it. You should treat yourself. It's very illustrative. It's elucidating. You will actually understand. But for those of you who still don't understand, let me explain it this way. Cyrus Vance had investigated the Trump children before and gave him a pass. So the idea that Cyrus Vance is political against Donald Trump, dismiss yourself of that notion, because his previous, charging decisions will not bear that out. That's number one. Number two, he's leaving office. He was Cy Vance is elected, and he's not running for a 4th term, and he's leaving office. And I think he would like control over this case and have it resolved one way or another before he leaves. In fact, I'm not the only one who thinks that. Everybody thinks that.
It is assumed that Vance will not be running again. His term is ending. This could be a way to leave it to the jury. So if they come up short, it doesn't look like it was on him at the end of his term. We see this strategy occasionally in cop cases. Even when there's videotape, they'll go to the grand jury. Why? Put it on the people to decide whether or not we move forward.
Right.
Or, and this is more likely in this scenario, Cyrus Vance is ready to make a run at one of the most evasive targets we have seen. The grand jury, with its many advantages for the prosecutor, and we will go through them for you tonight, including extensive subpoena power to demand evidence to indict one or more people, is very, very significant, especially because of this key element. In a case like this, an economic case, a white-collar case, as we used to say, when you indict somebody, you are able to keep the proof behind the charges secret. Remember, a grand jury is a secret proceeding. So in a complicated case like this, the prosecutor goes before the grand jury. They can keep it simple. They keep using words that will resonate. And if that grand jury hands down what they call a true bill, an indictment, you'll see the charges against you, but you won't know what they have behind it. Prosecutors have been looking into whether the Trump organization misled lenders and insurance companies about the value of properties and paid appropriate taxes. In basic, what does that mean? Well, when you were going to lenders, you were saying this is worth $1 gazillion. When you had to pay taxes, you were saying it's worth like $50. That's what this is about.
Exactly. That is what this is about. And did you know when you were saying this is worth $1 gazillion that it was only worth $50? And did you know that when you knew it was worth $1 gazillion and you said, oh, it's only worth $50 for the purpose of taxation, did you know you were cheating? Did you know? That's the difference between a civil case and a criminal case. And of course, the penalties in a civil case are money penalties, right? You pay a fine, or you have to dissolve your corporation, or you can no longer hold a position of honor in a charity, et cetera, et cetera. But the penalty for a criminal guilty verdict, a jury verdict, the criminal penalty, is to lose your liberty. Now, of course, the sentencing, there's guidelines, and the judge sometimes has the final say. So the amount of time you will lose your liberty, that's a separate question. But I'm telling you what the difference between having to pay a civil fine is versus having to meet a criminal guilty verdict. You will be handcuffed, and you will be taken to jail right there on the spot in the courtroom. Now, in this case, we're talking about tens of millions of dollars, tens of millions. We're talking about just a handful of properties. God only knows, what went on in Atlantic City, or with airlines, or with water, or with state companies, or with, we know what happened with the charity. It was bogus. We know that. But this was something we sort of kind of could, I don't want to say take to the bank because that would be punny, but we sort of knew when Cy Vance's team brought in this RICO lawyer, Mark Pomerantz. Remember that? We sort of knew that the Trump organization was being looked at as a racketeering, influenced, corrupt organization, RICO. And if this actually produces a true bill, if this actually produces a criminal indictment, there will be a trial. And if there's a guilty verdict, Trump will be taken to jail in front of everybody.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844.
561-270-3844. Is there any indication that prosecutors are already pressuring Mr. Weisselberg or his children in this case?
Yes. I mean, we know from our reporting that the prosecutors in the DA's office want to flip Alan Weisselberg. They see Alan Weisselberg as sort of the human equivalent to all those millions of pages of tax returns that they got a few months ago. Even better, Alan Weisselberg, if he wanted to, could give you information about Trump's intent. Yes. He could say, look, we took this move because Donald Trump told me. Donald Trump understood what he was doing, and we did it anyway. And that's a really key part of proving any sort of criminal case, especially one involving taxes, where there's a higher burden of proof. You have to show that somebody understood the law they were breaking before they broke it.
Right.
So Weisselberg is key to this case, and that's why there's so much pressure on him. It's a handful of properties all around two themes. One, that he deceived taxing authorities by getting what he called conservation easements on his properties, and basically saying that he'd given up development rights that were worth maybe more than they actually were, saving money on his taxes. There's also a question about a $100 million plus loan that was forgiven on his Chicago tower. If you have a big loan like that forgiven, generally you have to pay income tax. There was a question of whether Trump had actually done that. And then there's questions about whether he misled lenders by telling lenders that he had more money or he had more assets than he actually did to make himself look like a better credit risk.
Exactly. Thank you. So that is the reporter for the Washington Post who actually found out that a grand jury has been convened for the purpose of hearing evidence of criminal intent, hearing evidence against at least the Trump organization with regard to insurance fraud and tax fraud. And the tax fraud is pretty simple and straightforward. It has to do with a lender forgiving in Chicago, on the Chicago Tower, there was a $100 million loan that the lender just said, you don't have to pay me. You don't have to pay me. And in a normal situation, meaning if I did it, if you did it, if somebody actually, we could get somebody to forgive the loan on our car, we would have to pay income tax on the amount that we said we would pay but is now forgiven in order to own the car, in order to own the house. You see what I mean? Well, Trump didn't pay taxes on that. He didn't pay anything. In fact, Donald Trump for the last 2 years paid $750 in taxes. Federal income tax. The other issue is on the Westchester property where Donald Trump said that he would let the land go for the purpose of conservation and got to write off the value of the land that he gave for conservation purposes. And that, he says, was worth $21 million in a tax break for him, right? $21 million worth of land is what he said he gave for conservation. And there's a lot of dispute about really what was the value of this land off the highway in Westchester for the purpose of conservation and development rights, right? So that's what they're looking at. That is what they're looking at. I have to tell you that we don't know what the grand jury will decide, but I will tell you the little factoid about grand juries. In 99% of the cases that are brought to a grand jury, there is enough evidence that the grand jury indicts the person being surveyed, being looked at, having evidence brought against. 99.9% of the time, the grand jury indicts. So, I mean, do you remember when Howard Dean, the Nixon hero, who actually, blew the lid off of the Watergate scandal because, Howard Dean went to jail, right? Howard Dean just said, that's it, I'm done. And he actually gave his testimony and he said there's a cancer on the presidency, meaning there's law breaking going on. So if we're going to use that analogy, then Donald Trump is in late stage cancer. You understand? Late stage cancer. Because you can't avoid being indicted by a grand jury when witnesses and tax documents, thousands of pages, if not more, are used as evidence to show that you intended criminally to break the law. So I would say, so Donald Trump, what was his response? Okay, so, we ought to make this into like an LOL or some sort of a LMFAO, some of those, or ICYMI. ICYMI. You know how long it took me to figure out, in case you missed it, was ICYMI? Yeah, long time. I hate that. I like words. Words are my friend. Anyway, we should make, what he said into one of those, right? Into an anagram. Because he uses it so often. He said that it's the greatest witch hunt in American history. So GWHIAH, for those of you who are going to troll me today. Save yourself the trouble and and also the word count in the Twitter. You only get a certain amount. Okay, so GWHIAH. You could hashtag that if you like, and I'll understand what you mean. Yeah, greatest witch hunt of all. But we're getting so close to the freaking witch. They hunted witches and occasionally found one. So that is what's going on here, okay? That is what's going on here. Now, if you think that you're glad to hear news like this, imagine how overjoyed Mitch McConnell feels. Or Marco Rubio. Or Nikki Haley. Or Lindsey Graham. Or anybody that wants to run for president as a Republican in 2024. You see what I mean? So you even have his friends as his enemies rooting for him to be arrested, jailed, and hauled off into, some sort of a nether region. And this happened to Michael Cohen. You got to remember, Michael Cohen actually went to jail for tax cheating. That's why Michael Cohen went to jail. And Michael Cohen paid $3 million in taxes. Donald Trump paid $750 in taxes. And when Donald Trump was debating Joe Biden and the issue of how much he paid in taxes came up, Donald Trump chose to lie and say that he had paid millions in taxes. We're about to find out if that's exactly true. But Michael Cohen says he knows that that was a lie.
Is it true that you paid $750 in federal income taxes each of those 2 years?
I paid millions of dollars in taxes, millions of dollars of income tax.
No, Mr. President.
Go ahead.
I'm asking you a question. Will you tell us how much you paid in federal income taxes in 2016 and 2017?
Millions of dollars.
So he says millions of dollars. The report is 750 in those years. Do you believe he lied last night, Michael?
I believe that anytime he opens his mouth, he's lying. And he definitely did not pay millions of dollars. I paid millions of dollars during those 2 years. I paid $3 million while he paid $1,500. And as I've said so many times now, and yet I get hit with tax evasion. Well, if I was charged with 36 months, how many is he going to get? 360 months?
Michael Cohen is so livid. And Michael Cohen has been cooperating with Cyrus Vance's investigation and Letitia James' investigation. And he was asked when Pomerantz was brought on whether he thought Cy Vance was ready to charge, okay? Now, he's got some inside information because he's part of it.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
Do you get the sense that they are ready to prosecute this man, Donald Trump?
Well, look, right now they're in the process of waiting for Mazars, which is the accounting firm that's been handling Trump's taxes for a long, long time. They're waiting for that information. And basically that information will just assist in corroborating all the other information that they have gathered over the course of the past 3 years when they first started this investigation.
Oh. Okay, but did you get a sense just in talking to them that could you tell whether, in your mind, this is leading toward an Al Capone sort of scenario, or whether it's just an inquiry that could leave Donald Trump free and clear, just from your sense of talking with them?
So my sense is that Cy Vance who's politically astute, did not bring in the likes of an individual like Mark Pomerantz, a incredibly well-known and prolific attorney when it comes to this area of significant financial crimes, as well as complex financial crimes. They didn't bring him in, not to bring an indictment. And I suspect the indictment will probably be sooner than later.
So that was a couple of months ago when the Manhattan District Attorney, Cy Vance, brought in this expert in RICO, in racketeering influence corrupt organizations, a man who is extremely capable of looking into complex financial crimes. We sort of give them one label, white-collar crime, and it makes it sound like there are no victims. And no. This is fraud, pure and simple, and this is fraud at a very high level with lots and lots of moving parts. Now, I will say, I apologize to John Dean. I just called John Dean Howard Dean. I apologize to Howard Dean for aging him, and now I have to apologize to John Dean because there's nothing wrong with being John Dean's age. But John Dean, Watergate, Howard Dean, scream. He hates that. No, Howard Dean ran for president of the United States of America, and Howard Dean is a doctor. And, we all know the difference between our deans, right? We know the difference between the It's just that Howard is one of my all-time favorite names. How'd I do? Boy, you guys, you actually sit there and listen to every syllable that comes out of my fabulously formed lips. And if, God forbid, John Dean becomes Howard Dean and Howard Dean becomes, oh my God, the whole freaking phone lights up. And then you just go on your merry little way and leave me all by myself.
They're just trying to help, Randy. They're just furiously, vehemently trying to help. That's all they're doing.
Vehemently, furiously. That doesn't sound, so altruistic. That doesn't sound kind. It sounds like they're pouncing on me. No, but I get it. I understand. So thank you for keeping us completely, factually, honest. Okay, so John Dean is what I was talking about. It said that there was a cancer on the presidency, and now you can see that Donald Trump's cancer is in late stages. And that was the point I was trying to make. And that, what everybody in this country really needs is a good trial of Donald Trump so that they can understand the enormous amount of lying and propaganda that this man has spewed through the pie hole of his, causing immense damage to democracy itself. It's not just that his politics were, perverted, or that he had no policy. It's not just that he promoted racist, shameless racism, meaning you could, we know in this country that 30% of Americans are always going to have racist feelings. Some will act on them, some won't. But Donald Trump, there used to be shame associated with that after the Civil Rights Act and all, and people got television in their living rooms and saw what Jim Crow actually looked like. People were ashamed of what the police were doing. People were ashamed of the separate but equal, crap. People were ashamed of what happened to little girls in a church basement, or to students who were simply trying to go to a college or a high school. People were ashamed. And Donald Trump told them, you don't need to be ashamed. And I'll tell you why he did it. He did it because it was self-serving. Obviously, it's all he cared about. He's a scam artist. He's a con man. He's a demagogue. He's an authoritarian. But he did it because he understood something. And I want you to understand this thing. And there is an article today in the homework that actually bears me out. For a very long time, I've been explaining to you that there's this massive demographic shift that is happening in our country and has been happening in our country. And that whenever things change, men especially get very unnerved. Now, as a partner to a man, I think I need to soothe and calm and make okay any of the change that unnerves my male partner, right? But the rest, Donald Trump did not feel like he needed to assure or assuage or comfort or be empathetic or understanding that change can be frightening to old white men. I live with an old white man. I get it. But Donald Trump also got it. But he decided that he was going to use it to grow fundraising, his base, Al-Qaeda, that he was going to enrich himself and get power for himself based on the changing demographic. Well, guess what there is now in this country? Not white women. Okay, I'll go over the numbers with you, but white men in this country are only 30% of the population. Isn't it interesting that that's about how many people still support Donald Trump? I'm just saying, but white men represent in this here country today 30% of the total population. And yet white men represent 62% of office holders in this country. How does that happen? How could you say that's a democracy when you see this kind of demographic mismatch? Well, it has to do with, as long as you're in power and you're an incumbent, you get to fundraise and you get to draw the district maps, right? And you enjoy the power to change, suppress voting laws, which is why there's this massive attack on voting laws based on Donald Trump's big lie. It's all his really, and the Republicans' sick, twisted way of hanging on to power when they know that only 30% of the people in this country who vote for them, and it's not all white men that vote for them, so some percentage of 30% of white men vote for them so that they can hold 62% of all the public offices in this country, dominating both chambers of Congress, 42 state legislatures, and statewide roles across the nation, okay? 62% white men are in those positions, and only 30% of their constituents are white men. You see what I mean? That is what this is about. That is why the racism was put out there in a shameless fashion, and it removed the stigma of saying racist things. Now, this has increased violence, race-based violence in this country against, you name it. Anti-Semitic acts are through the roof in this country. People are attacking people based on whether or not they wear a yarmulke, or based on whether or not they wear a Jewish star around their neck. Really, it's the 21st freaking century. Okay, we had to pass an Asian hate crime bill because people were randomly attacking Asian people as if every Asian person was from the same country, and Donald Trump told them to hate China. Well, there's a lot of reasons to not be a fan of the government of China. They're communists, for number one. Number two, they repress people, they torture people, they disappear people. Yes, but the ignorance in this country is such that if you are from a country that's thousands of miles away from China, oh, I don't know, let's say the Philippines, or let's say Thailand, or let's say Japan, or American Samoa, or Hawaii, or whatever, all of a sudden you're Chinese because Donald Trump said so. I mean, it's the amount of violence that we saw on January 6th, the insurrection. They were, for 99% of them were old white men. You know, this one old white man, holy crap. You remember by accident they found like a pickup truck, and it was sitting in blocking the street. And when they went to see the pickup truck, they saw weapons in the pickup. It turns out this was a 71-year-old white man who had like 11 napalm bombs in his car. He had, 20 different weapons in his car. He had some of the most lethal crap in his car. A judge just said, can't release him on bail.
Mary had a little man.
The fault. We believe that all men are created equal.
To the magnificent mosaic that is America.
From radio beacon to radio beacon. I have a dream today. Change has come to America.
Believe me. Help is on the way.
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
It's a figment of your imagination.
Randi Rhodes Show. Turn up your mind.
If the Washington Post reporting is to be believed and is corroborated, it's very specific as to the nature of this grand jury, as you pointed out, the length of this grand jury, specific as to how many days a week they'll be hearing testimony. So I think it's significant. I think that a combination of what you mentioned with respect to Letitia James, the New York AG, who not only is contributing resources, but made an announcement that what had begun as a civil investigation was now a criminal investigation, and they were cross-designating people to work in Cy Vance's office, means that they must have come across some evidence as to somebody's state of mind, that the misconduct they were investigating does not seem to be the product of negligence or recklessness or mistake, but intentional criminality.
There you have
I
it.
also think it's the case that the grand jury move, in combination with the hiring of a very well-respected outside lawyer to come into the fold, Mark Pomerantz, combined with the other thing you mentioned, that Cy Vance is leaving office. The primary to replace him takes place in 3 or 4 weeks. He's gone by the end of the year. Knowing what I know of Cy Vance and how prosecutors think about these things, it seems to me that this is the end game, and that whether there's a charge against Donald Trump himself or not, that the decision about that, I suspect, is one that Cy Vance wants to make on his own and not saddle his successor with.
Just smile, everybody. Just smile. Just really feel that. Feel that. That's Preet Bharara, as you know. And he's telling you everything that I am telling you, that everybody who understands the nature of civil cases versus criminal cases is telling you. The nature of the situation with the district attorney in Manhattan, with the attorney general in New York, that this is the end game. This is end stage cancer for Donald Trump. This criminality is now provable, demonstrably provable, and it all revolves around state of mind. Like I said, the difference between a civil case and a criminal case is not just at the end what you will actually have to give up. You will have to give up money or positions of honor in a civil case. In a criminal case, you have to give up your freedom, your liberty, your ability to move about the country, okay? You are now handcuffed and you are taken to jail, where I suspect Donald Trump will die, because he's 74 freaking years old, and it's like a Bernie Madoff thing. Bernie Madoff just died in jail because the sentences for complex crimes like RICO violations, like racketeering, influence, corrupt organizations, is steep. It's huge, long. Michael Cohen sat there and told us that he got, 36 months, 3 years, right, for tax evasion after he had paid $3 million in taxes. Donald Trump paid $750. $750 in the last 2 years each year. So $1,500 total taxes paid federal in 2 years, because he literally feels he's bulletproof, especially as president, which now brings us to the fact that he was semi-bulletproof as president under Bill Barr. Under Bill Barr. Bill Barr was the only decent lawyer Donald Trump ever had, and Donald Trump didn't have to pay Bill Barr a nickel, not a red cent, not a dime. We paid Bill Barr. We did. And I want you to keep that in mind as you experience the lying, the cheating, the criminal submissions to the courts that Bill Barr made on behalf of his client, Donald Trump, even though his client as Attorney General of the United States was us. The Attorney General of the United States is not a personal attorney. But yet, Bill Barr was the only decent personal attorney that Donald Trump ever had. Rudy is just bat crap crazy, and Rudy is under investigation too. Rudy's had 18 different, electronic devices, taken by a warrant, taken and are now being used to build a case against his criminal behavior. Whether or not it was just illegal lobbying and violating, foreign lobbying laws, or whether it was, collusion or blackmail or, trying to upend American elections. I mean, we don't even know what the extent of Rudy's crimes are. We just know Rudy lies. We know Rudy drinks too much. We know Rudy is irresponsible. We know Rudy's son is now running for governor of New York so that Rudy's son can have control over the Rudy case. It's like this whole family criminal enterprise that these white men with a couple of shekels engage in with politics to get themselves power to shield the family from ever coming to the bar of justice, from ever paying, for the crimes that they committed. I mean, it's very sick. Okay, it's very sick. But anyway, Michael Cohen was also one of Donald Trump's lawyers, and he ended up going to jail. Rudy probably will too. But Bill Barr was a capable slime ball. Okay, Bill Barr was the smartest of all the personal attorneys, except Bill Barr made one critical error. One critical error. Know what that was? He represented Donald Trump as the Attorney General of the United States and decided to insert himself into a court case to shield Donald Trump from ever answering obstruction of justice charges, which clearly were spelled out in Volume 2 of the Mueller report. And he did it to protect who he had adopted as his client, not us, the American people. No, he did it to protect Donald Trump. And the judge that knows it, her name is Judge Amy Berman Jackson. And you should learn her name once and for all, because she is key to this case about these memos that were sued for and were given to the public. All right, so there are memos that are Bill Barr's reasoning for saying to the court that Mueller couldn't prove obstruction of justice, and it's not, and I told you, this expression, but for, this is a big legal thing. But for Donald Trump being president, he would be charged, right? Bill Barr went further than that, and he did not make the case to the court that the only reason why Donald Trump wasn't being charged with obstruction of justice is because he's president of the United States. No, Bill Barr said that Mueller failed to prove his case of obstruction of justice. Turns out that the judge that actually saw the evidence and the judge that actually read what the Office of Legal Counsel was putting down on paper and what Bill Barr was putting down on paper and submitting to the court as officers of the court, because that's what attorneys are. They are officers of the court. And that means you can't lie to the court. I know it sounds crazy, but even Rudy Giuliani didn't do it, which is why I bring up Rudy Giuliani. When Rudy Giuliani was all over the country and in the parking lot of Four Seasons Landscaping, thinking it was a five-star resort or whatever he was thinking because he was drunk, Rudy Giuliani did not lie to the court. Rudy Giuliani refused. He told you and a lot of conspiracy nuts out there that he had thousands of affidavits. He had thousands of affidavits of people who would swear that they were witnesses to election fraud or to ballot harvesting or to vote flipping or to all kinds of crime, right? But when it came time to submit the evidence to the court, the sworn affidavits that he collected or that he would sign, as being the person who took the deposition of these people, whatever, he didn't do it. He didn't put those into evidence in front of a court because he knew he would go to jail. Bill Barr did do it. He did. And the court is furious. Judge Berman Jackson has called out Bill Barr on this. So we have a situation where we still haven't seen the memos, and I'm going to tell you why.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
The first thing to know about the Justice Department now appealing the judge's ruling and fighting to keep this document secret, first thing to know about it is that the brief filed here, the reasoning explained by Merrick Garland's Justice Department, is humiliating. It's abject and humiliating. Throughout the brief filed with the court late last night, the Justice Department, the current Justice Department, is just crawling and scraping about how they didn't mean what they said and how sorry they are that it looked the way that the judge thought it looked, but they didn't mean it to look that way. And now, in retrospect, they can see how misleading their previous statements seemed to the court when Barr was Attorney General. But really, please, couldn't they be forgiven for all that? And I know you think I'm being hyperbolic, but look, this is the actual language from the brief that has now been filed with the court. Quote, in retrospect, the government acknowledged that its briefs could have been clearer, and it deeply regrets the confusion that caused. But the government's counsel and declarants did not intend to mislead the court. Quote, we regret the language that was imprecise in the government's brief and the confusion it has caused. Quote, we regret that we did not make this distinction clearer in our briefing. Quote, the government now recognizes that several statements in its briefing were susceptible to an interpretation. Quote, these passages could have been clearer, and the government regrets that they were not. Quote, the second and third sentences could have been worded differently to avoid confusion. Quote, with the benefit of hindsight, the government regrets that its declarations and briefs did not state expressly. I mean, this is gross. This is humiliating. This is the Justice Department now, under Merrick Garland as Attorney General, bending over backwards like this to try to make it seem like the Justice Department under Trump was acting in good faith and doing their best, and all the false and disingenuous things they told the court about former President Trump's liability to potential criminal prosecution. The false and disingenuous things they told not just the public, but the court should all be forgiven.
Right, and it's one of those things where you scratch your head and other various body parts and you say, well, why is Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the United States now, trying to keep sealed the Barr memos that the court ruled should be made public so that we, the American people, will finally know that Bill Barr stage managed the Mueller report's findings, specifically on the charges, multiple, of obstruction of justice by Donald Trump. Why would Merrick Garland try to keep secret after the court ruled that we have a right to know that our Attorney General previously lied to the court repeatedly to protect his perceived client, Donald Trump, when his client truly is the American people? Why? The only conclusion that I can make based on my ability to deduce with logic and reason the situation in which we find ourselves in is that it's because next week, Don McGahn, the former White House counsel, is going to testify under oath, albeit behind closed doors, to the House Judiciary Committee, which, as you know, its chairman is Adam Schiff, who has wanted the answers to these questions and deserves them, according to the courts now, deserves them, and has been fighting for the testimony of the White House counsel, Don McGahn, for years now, and has finally prevailed and is about to secure Don McGahn's testimony under oath about what he knew and saw happen in the White House with regard to collusion, not just between the Russian government and the Trump campaign, but collusion between the Attorney General of the United States, Bill Barr, and the Office of Legal Counsel under Donald Trump to cover it all up. I really believe that the reason why they are apologizing to the court for these DOJ briefs is because they are current members of the Department of Justice, and they are embarrassed and humiliated by the crap that was submitted under the awesome DOJ, on the awesome DOJ stationery by the former Attorney General. And so they did want to make an apology to the court about their department previously lying to the court in this way. And that's why those briefs are full of apologies. but they also are moving to keep them sealed for now because Bill Barr is a defendant. I have to believe that. I cannot imagine any other reason for the current Attorney General of the United States, who takes the law very seriously. You know, Merrick Garland is not a progressive, and he is not a conservative. He is not a Democrat. He is not a Republican. He is a man of the law. He was worthy of being a Supreme Court justice. He should have had a hearing at least. But the partisans, the Mitch McConnells of the world, the Republicans who make up 62% of white office holders, representing only 30% of the country's white men, they did not have an interest in a free and fair weighing of the law with a blindfold on. They wanted partisans in there. They wanted Amy Comey Barrett. They wanted Kavanaugh. They wanted whoever the Heritage Foundation wanted. They wanted whoever the moneyed elite wanted. They wanted whoever the Federalist Society wanted, because they have no principles, this remnant of the once grand old party. They're just interested in holding on to power. And they thought they needed judges that would rule for them when they suppressed votes. They thought they needed judges who would rule for them when they redrew district maps with racist intentions, when they went after people of color who are making up the majority of Americans every day more and more. They wanted their voices silenced, suppressed, marginalized, diluted, to take majorities of people and divide them into districts where they would represent a minority of the people still, right? And so they went with that. But Merrick Garland was worthy of a Supreme Court seat. And now he's our Attorney General. And I just don't think that the Attorney General of the United States is covering up for Donald Trump. I mean, it makes no sense to me that any Attorney General other than Bill Barr would cover up what is an obvious crime to various courts. Now, Amy Berman Jackson has ordered the public release of the still secret Bill Barr memos. She wrote there's no way to misinterpret or reinterpret or not understand her words. They are so plain and to the point. And what she says in her plain and to the point writing is that Bill Barr misrepresented actual facts to the court to get a jump on public relations with regard to what Mueller found was provable.
Call in, connect. To speak to Randi, call 561-270-3844. 561-270-3844.
However this resolves with the Justice Department and what gets released to the public and what doesn't, and this question of why the new Attorney General is trying to paper over what Barr did to protect Trump and to try to occlude from view, even of the courts, the question of Trump's potential criminal liability. Regardless of how that all resolves, the question that's now live and kind of red hot is whether or not Trump now is liable to federal prosecution for obstruction of justice by the Justice Department, right? Whether or not he's liable for prosecution right now for the instances of alleged obstruction of justice that were laid out in the Mueller report. None of those things are so far in the past that they're outside the statute of limitations. I mean, what has become clear through all of this unequivocally is that the Barr-era Justice Department never did substantively consider obstruction charges against Trump.
Right.
Despite all the evidence laid out against him, despite them lying to the public in the courts and saying they looked at that evidence very clearly, they did not. Mm-hmm. It was never looked at. We now know. The question of whether or not Trump should face federal criminal charges is no longer constrained by him being a president and therefore a sitting president and therefore immune from prosecution. That no longer applies. And the question of potential federal prosecution of him for obstruction of justice has never been substantively looked at, despite the hundreds of detailed pages of evidence about those alleged crimes that was made public in the Mueller investigation. So, will the Garland-era Justice Department now consider those charges?
That's the question. Will the Garland Justice Department consider the question of whether or not Donald Trump obstructed justice and should be prosecuted for at least 5 episodes of obstruction of justice during the Mueller investigation? Will Bill Barr be investigated for lying to the court to cover up the fact that he never looked at whether or not Donald Trump committed criminal acts as president of the United States, and instead lied to the American people and lied to the court when he said he had considered if the elements of obstruction had been proven by Robert Mueller and that the Office of Legal Counsel was advising Bill Barr on whether or not Mueller had made a case that could withstand the court is a lie. It's a lie, and Bill Barr lied to the court about what he did to figure out if Mueller had proven obstruction of justice 5 different times. He made 10 allegations of obstruction and went into very, very specific detail, Mueller did, in Volume 2 of the Mueller report, and proved at least 5 of them. At least 5 of them. What really happened here is very basic. The Office of Legal Counsel was also perverted by what Donald Trump turned the White House and the executive branch of the American government into. And that is a racketeering, influenced, corrupt organization. Yes, that's all Donald Trump knows how to do, is run RICO organizations. That is what the organization called the Trump Organization is under investigation for in New York now. Criminal RICO violations. That's what this new attorney who can do complex financial crimes was called in there to do. And now we know that after he arrived, he put his nose to the grindstone. They got the tax returns. They got the report from the accountants, Mazars. Probably Weisselberg flipped because he doesn't want to spend his golden years in a prison cell, and had the information that could show Donald Trump's criminal intention to defraud insurance companies and to defraud the United States government out of tax dollars and, increase the value of properties for insurance money, like the oldest scam in the book, right? When Donald Trump moved into the executive branch of the government as its head, he turned our executive branch of government into a racketeering, influence, corrupt organization. And what the judge found in these memos is that Bill Barr went along with it, and that Bill Barr also perverted, and Donald Trump also perverted, the Office of Legal Counsel. Bill Barr represented to the court that he was following the advice of the Office of Legal Counsel. The judge found something different. She wrote, quote, in the case of the memo on whether Trump could be charged, she concluded that instead of Bill Barr following OLC advice, the memo, quote, was being written by the very same people at the very same time, working hand in hand to craft the advice. Meaning Bill Barr went to the Office of Legal Counsel to get cover for the lie that he was going to tell the court. He wanted the Office of Legal Counsel to write down that the 3 elements of obstruction were never proved and that Trump couldn't be prosecuted anyway because he was the president of the United States. Now, Bill Barr could have just stuck with the president can't be indicted because he's president of the United States. But Bill Barr was not hired to do just that. Bill Barr was hired to say that once Donald Trump left the office of the presidency and all that was protecting him as the office holder of the presidency of the United States, that there was no case that could be brought because no case was proved. And Bill Barr went to the Office of Legal Counsel and said, I want you to write that. I want you to write that as if you were advising me about the veracity of what Mueller found. I need for you to write down that Mueller did not prove the case. I need for you to write down that the elements of obstruction were not met. But that was untrue. And so what you had and what the judge saw and what she wrote when she said release the damn memos was that the Office of Legal Counsel was colluding, swear to God, with Bill Barr and Donald Trump. She wrote the suggestion that the Attorney General's advisors, the Office of Legal Counsel, were helping him make a decision about whether to initiate or decline a prosecution is contrary to the very memorandum at issue. She said, so why did the Attorney General's advisors, at his request, create a memorandum that evaluated the prospective merit of the facts amassed by the special counsel? Lifting the curtain reveals the answer. He did it to get a jump on public relations. She finds that Bill Barr was disingenuous. She says the word disingenuous. She says obfuscate. These are all legal words for lied to the court. She writes it down. And she says that the two attorneys over at the Office of Legal Counsel, whose names are Engel and O'Callaghan, were writing to Bill Barr asking him to please determine whether prosecution would be appropriate given the evidence that Mueller had amassed. And Bill Barr instead told them, no, just say he didn't meet the criteria.
This is the Randi Rhodes Show. To speak with Randi, dial 561-270-3844. That's 561-270-3844.
This is now the second federal judge in ordering these things to be unredacted who has essentially said Bill Barr was misleading the country. Misleading the country by saying there was no evidence of collusion, misleading the country by saying that he was compelled to conclude that you could not indict the president on obstruction. And he's also, the judge is also saying that essentially Barr has been dishonest with the court about what that memo is about. It's not about just deliberations. Apparently it's about spin.
Yeah.
And it's for that reason, because it's about how do they spin this pre-decision, this predetermination that they weren't going to indict the president no matter what. How do they spin that? That's not something that can be concealed from the public. So it's interesting at many levels.
That's Adam Schiff, who will take the testimony of Don McGahn next week behind closed doors as the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, because they've been fighting over a subpoena that subpoenaed Don McGahn's appearance for years now. For freaking years. And they finally prevailed, and he will go and give his testimony. Now, this is the second federal judge who weighed in on Bill Barr's disingenuous nature, that he lied to the court, okay? She actually noted that Bill Barr told Congress, lied to Congress, that him and his deputy attorney general got to the decision that Trump should not be charged in consultation with the Office of Legal Counsel. And that Bill Barr, when he was under oath testifying to Congress, testified about the consultation and the deliberations that he entered into with the Office of Legal Counsel after the Mueller report came out. And after Bob Mueller wrote a private letter to Bill Barr complaining to him that his description of what Mueller found in his report before it was released publicly was false. How could he possibly testify to that? It was false. And Mueller wrote a letter to Bill Barr, and Bill Barr said he never said that in his letter. He lied. He repeatedly lied. So now, after this whole litigation, right, the judge wrote, in the case of the memo on whether Trump could be charged, rather than following the OLC advice, the memo and Bill Barr's decision were being written by the very same people at the very same time, working hand in hand to craft the advice that the office was supposedly delivering to Bill Barr. She goes on. Not only was the Attorney General, Bill Barr, being disingenuous then, but the Department of Justice has been disingenuous, lying, to this court with respect to the existence of any decision-making process that should be shielded by the deliberative process privilege, attorney-client privilege. She concluded that writing this memo was expressly understood to be entirely hypothetical. This is how he got them to write this stuff. And that the redacted versions of the document deliberately obscured this fundamental aspect of the exercise. She found that the claims that were made by the Justice Department to shield the memo from being made public, quote, are so inconsistent with evidence on the record that they are not worthy of credence. She said that Bill Barr and the Department of Justice sought to, quote, obfuscate that it had set out to create a legal justification for a decision that leaders of the Justice Department had already made, and that was to never accuse the president of a crime. So Bill Barr, the fix was in. And what Bill Barr did was he went to the Office of Legal Counsel and he told them to write hypotheticals about whether Mueller, because the report had just, nobody had even seen it yet. And Bill Barr put out a memo. He didn't engage in collusion. There was no collusion. And Mueller found no law breaking. There was no obstruction of justice. There was this, and then subsequent testimony testifies the same way over and over and over, to the point where Mueller writes him a letter and says, that is not what's in my report. Why are you mischaracterizing what I found and what our work shows? Why are you mischaracterizing the evidence with regard to obstruction of justice? Why are you lying, not just to the American people, not just to the Congress, but now you're lying under oath and to the court? What Bill Barr did was he went to the Office of Legal Counsel and he said, write a hypothetical conclusion that Mueller found nothing. Just write that. And they wrote it down, and then they felt so exposed when they realized he was using it as something real and giving it to the court, that they wrote to him too. So did Mueller. And they wrote to him too before he even went public with this and said, wait a minute, you have to tell us reasons why the president can't be prosecuted. You have to tell us reasons why we shouldn't opine that the president committed at least 5 acts of obstruction of justice. And Bill Barr didn't. He didn't. He just relied on their hypothetical words and included it as being advice he received from the Office of Legal Counsel. The judge is saying in her opinion, and another federal judge also said the same damn thing about Bill Barr, that is not true. What you're saying to the court is a lie. What you're doing is disingenuous. What you're doing is obfuscating. What you're doing is lying to the court. And so I have to believe that the reason why the current Justice Department and the current Attorney General isn't ready to have the court release the unredacted memo that Bill Barr wrote is because it would influence in a negative way the active investigation into what Bill Barr did. It's the only conclusion I can come up with, because to tell you the truth, you may not like Joe Biden. You may not like Joe Biden's manner of speech. You may not like his policies. You may not like, wanting to have free and fair elections. You may not like the idea that, we should invest in ourselves. You may not like the idea that, we actually profit off of an educated society, and therefore student loans ought to be forgiven. You may not like any of these ideas. You may not like Medicare. You may not like Medicaid. You may not like Obamacare. You may not like health insurance at all. But you cannot say that Joe Biden is a liar. And you cannot say that he's a cover-up artist. And you cannot say that Merrick Garland isn't a man of integrity. You could disagree with their policy all day. You could say investing in ourselves is not something that you countenance. It's not something I want. I want all of our money to go to rich people, and it will trickle down on me. And I believe in trickle-down economics, and I believe in Reaganomics, and I believe in a Muslim ban, and I believe America should never, ever, ever, have any trials at all. I don't believe in justice. I don't believe that, people should, stand in a courtroom and have a jury of their own peers decide whether or not they lose their liberty. I just think if I think somebody's guilty, they should go to jail. And, whatever I think is... But there's a reason why this Justice Department is arguing not to make all the information public yet. There is a reason. And I would bet that the reason is an ongoing investigation. I would just bet that. So I know that, everybody was sitting and wondering why in the world the Justice Department memo was not released, and why in the world was Merrick Garland arguing to not release this Bill Barr memo. Why would Merrick Garland argue to protect Bill Barr? Well, it makes no sense, because it's nonsense that Merrick Garland is protecting Bill Barr. It makes no sense. Something else is the reason why he's arguing not to make this public just yet. And so you have to sit there and give it some thought, instead of just sitting there and saying, our whole Justice Department is corrupt, even Merrick Garland. No, that makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. There is a memo that is still sealed because there are incidences in that memo of criminality, of lying to the court, that need to be fully fleshed out without making it public, so that testimony can be taken to corroborate it without anybody knowing exactly what's in it. I could be wrong. Like Don Henley said, I could be wrong, but I'm not. No, I'm not. But I could be wrong. But only time will tell. And by the way, Don McGahn is going to testify next week.